And it makes me wonder what the future of Satanism is with the younger generation, that they don't have any sense of just how outsider this was, even when we were starting the Satanic Temple.
Hmm. What is oh, I'm sorry, Steve, did you have a follow-up for that?
No, go ahead.
What you mentioned free speech there, and like I said, we alluded to this a little bit before we started the stream. One criticism that is oftentimes levied at us is that there are certain subjects, certain people, certain stances, certain arguments, certain debates that just should not be engaged. They should be ignored, pushed aside, exposed, but from far away. Don't engage in that sort of conversation. Why do you think it's important for like your opposition to have just an equal voice in a conversation as you do, and why you should have those conversations?
I'm of the strong opinion that mockery can be the best medicine against a stupid idea. Reasoned mockery, not just senseless memeing, but something well thought and something that really confronts the logic and what your opposition is saying. And as somebody who really feels motivated to seek out what's hidden and obscured, the other side of everything, I just can't help but feel that when you suppress somebody's voice, it has the paradoxical effect oftentimes of elevating them. And when I see, say, an idiot like Alex Jones, he's not really silenced. He's broadcast all over the place, and that's just one of those things. You shut somebody off one platform, it's not like they're not accessible anywhere else. But right. When you allow somebody to just all of a sudden be the free speech martyr, to put forward this notion that their idea rings so soundly with the truth that it's deemed dangerous by their opposition, must be suppressed, you give it a kind of allure and appeal that it just does not deserve. And I recently made some comment on Twitter, even just to show you how people are so unable to grasp nuance in this discussion. And I was talking about how I left some snarky tweet about how I realize that there are some people who listen to Alex Jones and they might not necessarily subscribe to the most radical ideas put forward on his show, but they view him at least as some skeptical balancing voice against the approved narrative or whatever else. And then I ended up by saying, I think those people are stupid too, because I don't think there's any excuse for justifying the raw, bloviating stupidity of Alex Jones. And I actually got some people saying, well, I thought you believed in free speech. Well, I do. But that includes my ability to say that Alex Jones is a complete idiot. It doesn't mean I agree with every type of speech being put out there. It means that I think this stuff, some of it should be laid out in the open for absolute evisceration. And it really hurts to see that people can't grasp that very basic kind of premise, that they think that by defending free speech, you defend the ideas, or that you endorse all of the ideas that go along with that, or that if you take a nonviolent stance, that you're simply protecting a certain type of odious asshole who would otherwise get punched. That's extremely unsophisticated thinking to the point of being childish.
Well said. People don't get what free speech really is. I don't think they think that if it's somebody saying that this idea is stupid, or a platform, deplatforming someone, that too is not infringing on their freedom of speech. It's It's when the government comes in and says you can't say this. You're silenced by the government. Steve, you see this a lot too, because you talk about it on your channel.
Boy, I you don't even know how much preaching to the choir you actually are with all this. I'm sitting here just like I'm actually like shaking with resonance, because what you said I've been saying for a very long time. Look, there are ways to mock things, and there's ways to appreciate a good argument against something that is just a shit argument, right? Arguing against a theist that you think is a bad idea with a meme is not going to get you very far, right? I mean, but like things like young Earth creationism. We mock young Earth creationism because we think it's fucking asinine, right? We think that the whole thing behind it is completely unscientific. We can actually show, though, that it's unscientific. We can actually show the facts behind it, right? So there's mockery to be had there, but we do it by presenting a good, solid, valid, structured argument with evidence and reason and logic to show why there should be mockery for people to think that we rode on T-Rexes with saddles and things of that nature. So I have to applaud what you just said, because I wish more people would understand those types of things like nuance, because they don't. They literally don't. They want to shut down the conversation if they are able to have a conversation on that level. And that's what I noticed the most. The people that cannot articulate this type of discussion are the ones that want to retreat into an isolationist chamber or echo chamber and prevent anybody else from having the discussion as well.
I always get this complaint too that that I'm a free speech absolutist. And then I get these geniuses pointing out to me that free speech absolutism doesn't exist because we already have restrictions based on, calling out fire in a crowded theater, defamation, things like that. I don't disagree with those restrictions. I think we should have recourse for people to make legal claims against defamation, for people to make claims against death threats. Those are definitely things that should be considered. I mean, not just considered. They should be litigated, and you should absolutely be restricted from doing those kinds of harmful acts. What I'm concerned about is broadening any of these definitions of what constitutes free speech and what does not. Broadening definitions of hate speech to become too subjective, that in the hands of whatever officiating agency oversees this, the Satanic Temple could be easily the first bit of collateral damage. Like I said, other church groups that say that, Satanism is by its very nature designed only to offend and mock them, that could find a sympathetic voice within any such officiating organization that would be inclined to hear it, to the point that we would be suppressed in, I just imagine the nightmare of having your voice suppressed and having somebody else define your point of view to the public for you, to the point where all of a sudden we're being claimed to be this kind of hate group that we're not. And that's a very dangerous precedent to set. And it's amazing to me that it's during the Trump administration that so many people are calling for further government restriction upon speech. I mean, who do they think they're giving that power to?
Yeah, that's a scary point, and you hit the nail on the head when you said that. And that's what we're seeing a lot too, and that's what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. Is those that are able to. Not sort of able, but they don't reflect your stances accurately, and they are trying to paint you under a label or a moniker that doesn't apply to you simply because you disagree with them. And even within factions that you would think would agree most of the time, like churches or between atheists. You can disagree without dividing those communities. And I think the biggest issue is that somebody will say something to somebody that they disagree with, and because they take it personally and they're not taking the time to sort of understand that person's actual stance on things. They're letting one thing cloud their judgment.
You can agree to what the appropriate ends are, right? You can agree that you want equal rights for marginalized groups, and you can disagree on tactic. And what we're finding is that, what I'm finding is that if I disagree regarding tactic of what's the best tactic to get to what we think is the ultimate social structure, I guess, then we're denigrated as having thrown in with the opposition. I mean, then we're nothing short of Nazis, just for the fact that we that we have these kind of tactical disagreements. And I like to think that we approach this by looking at the evidence. You know, I've written essays about this and justified my opinions with, I feel, case studies and other types of analyses put forward by those who investigate these types of issues. And I've written about free speech and nonviolence, and that has been enough in some cases to get people to feel like I'm only defending the opposition, which is absurd and again outright infantile.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this real quick. What do you suggest to somebody where there comes a time where, like you said, people agree with the ends, right? I think most of us in our community, we have a lot of the same mindsets. We want a lot of the similar things, right? But as you said, tactics are important. How you get there is important. We all have different roads, and I do believe it takes a village. I do believe it takes multiple different paths, and I do believe it takes multiple different inputs and opinions. Now, when we get suggestions and other people get suggestions on different ways of doing things, we evaluate it like any other group. But what do you say about the people that feel like when their opinion is not being taken on board, or at least not even to the point where, well, I should say that when we evaluate the opinion, but we find that opinion to be not conducive to the tactic that we want to use, find for somebody else, and that they will then again try to retreat in some type of isolationism, some kind of secularism, and some type of seclusion, and just kind of tell everybody else, well, if they're not going to take my advice, then I don't want to be a part of that organization any longer. I find that to be odd. I find that to be unproductive, to say the least. I mean, if somebody doesn't take your advice and they want to do things their own way, I don't see the issue to be had there. If you're not the ones, the one in charge making those final executive type decisions.
Well, we had an incident where we wanted to go after Twitter. Right. Twitter just would not verify our accounts, for one thing, and they wouldn't even get back to us on the request to do so, which is somewhat minor. But what happened later on seemed a bit more severe. We get death threats on Facebook all the time, and Facebook has never taken them seriously as violating their community standards. We always get this form letter back that says this does not violate our community standards, when in fact it does. That kind of targeting of a religious group, that kind of harassment, even straight up death threats, Facebook does not take action on. And Twitter hasn't been much better. And there was a case, but it all came to a head when some woman tweeted something out one time, saying something about burning down our headquarters in Salem, Massachusetts. There was some news article talking about how we had opened our headquarters, and she tweeted out some encouragement that somebody should go burn it down. And this wouldn't have gotten noticed probably if it hadn't been for former child actor Corey Feldman retweeting it. And then, a lot of people saw it, and I feel like, allowing threats like that to go unchallenged when you actually have standards against it, pre-existing standards against it that are directly stated, really does say something, I think, to the general public about how they can think of us, and it's kind of dangerous to us. I don't want people thinking that the rest of the world kind of agrees that we're these villains who deserve to have our place burned down or be murdered, and have this notion that they'd be considered heroes by the world at large if they went and did so. So I'm reporting this threat to Twitter, and Twitter got back and said it didn't violate their terms of service. So I retweeted the tweet, And I asked my followers to also report the tweet until somebody at Twitter realized that they were